Claire, you're no longer family. You never understood what it means to be a Donovan. My brother Marcus stood at the head of our family's Thanksgiving table, crystal glass raised, voice carrying across 40 guests as my parents smiled and kept carving the turkey like he'd just proposed a toast to good health. I'm Claire Donovan, 34, running Harvest Tech Solutions out of Seattle, a company that just closed $12 million in annual contracts with agricultural giants. But 3 years ago, I was 31, sitting in that Portland mansion dining room, surrounded by extended family, business partners, and people I'd known my whole life, watching my brother publicly exile me while everyone stared. The reason? 2 weeks earlier, I'd reported $800,000 in fraudulent transactions to the board of Donovan Agricultural Distribution, the family business my grandfather built from dirt and sweat. Marcus, the Golden Child CEO, and my father Richard had been funneling investor money into offshore accounts through fake vendor invoices. When I brought evidence to the board, they fired me for insubordination. The Thanksgiving announcement was their victory lap, their way of making sure I knew exactly where I stood. My younger sister Sienna held up her iPhone, filming my reaction for her Instagram stories, laughing behind manicured nails. I set down my fork, dabbed my mouth with the linen napkin embroidered with our family crest, and walked out the front door into the November rain without saying a word. Hello, beloved listeners. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. I'm always curious to know which corners of the world you're tuning in from. Let me know your city in the comments. Enjoy the story. That silence from my parents, that calculated smile as I passed the gravy boat, cost them everything they had. What I built in 3 years made their little empire look like a lemonade stand, and when they came crawling back 6 months ago begging for $2 million to save their skins, I had a surprise waiting that destroyed them completely. Growing up in Portland's West Hills, the Donovan name meant something. Our family owned Donovan Agricultural Distribution, a company my grandfather Patrick Donovan started in 1972 with one truck and a handshake deal with Oregon wheat farmers. By the time I was born, we had warehouses in 5 states, 200 employees, and my father Richard Donovan ran operations from a corner office with views of Mount Hood. My mother Patricia came from old Portland money, the kind that showed up in society pages and donated wings to hospitals. Marcus, 8 years older than me, was groomed from birth to take over, Dad's prodigy who could do no wrong. Sienna, 4 years younger, was the princess who got whatever she wanted with a pout and a credit card. Then there was me, the middle child who didn't quite fit the mold. Grandfather Patrick was different from the rest of them. While Dad obsessed over profit margins and Marcus networked at country clubs, Grandpa still visited farms personally, shook hands with the people who grew the food we distributed. Starting when I was 12, he'd take me along on Saturday runs to the Willamette Valley, driving his old Ford pickup that smelled like diesel and soil. He'd walk me through wheat fields, explaining crop rotations and market fluctuations, treating me like a future business partner instead of a kid. Integrity is the only currency that matters, Claire, he told me once, boots crunching through harvest stubble. You lose that, you got nothing worth keeping. I wrote it in my journal that night, underlining it 3 times. Mom thought these trips were beneath me, that I should be at ballet or cotillion with Sienna. Dad just nodded along with whatever she said. Marcus made fun of my muddy jeans at family dinners. By 15, I was working summers in the warehouses, actually working, not the fake internship Marcus got where he shadowed executives and took clients to golf. I drove forklifts, managed inventory sheets, learned shipping logistics from Ramon, a warehouse supervisor who'd been there since Grandpa's first year. Ramon taught me to read bills of lading, spot discrepancies in shipment weights, understand the razor-thin margins that kept small farms alive. Marcus showed up twice that summer, complained about the heat, and left early both times. Sienna never set foot in a warehouse her entire life. Thanksgiving dinners became showcases for Marcus's achievements. At 16, he closed a distribution deal with a regional grocery chain, and Dad stood up mid-meal to announce it like Marcus had discovered penicillin. The table erupted in applause. I just won a state competition for a business plan on sustainable farming logistics, placed first against 200 students, but nobody mentioned it. When I tried to bring it up, Mom patted my hand and said, "That's nice, dear," then asked Marcus about his college applications to Ivy League schools. Grandpa Patrick died when I was 22, massive heart attack in the main warehouse while inspecting a grain shipment. I was finishing my business degree at Portland State, working part-time in accounts receivable. His funeral drew 400 people, farmers in clean flannel shirts standing next to executives in Armani suits. At the reception, Dad announced that Marcus, fresh from his MBA at Stanford, would take over as CEO within a year. I was in the room when he said it, standing 5 feet away with a plate of untouched cucumber sandwiches. Dad looked right through me. Grandpa's left the company in a trust structure, equal shares to all 3 grandchildren, but voting control went to the eldest upon Dad's retirement. Marcus smiled like he'd won the lottery. Sienna shrugged and asked if her inheritance came in cash. I felt the floor tilt. Within 6 months of Marcus taking the CEO chair, things changed. Ramon, the warehouse supervisor who taught me everything, got fired for performance issues after 30 years of perfect service. The real reason? He'd questioned a shipment discrepancy to Marcus's assistant. 3 veteran employees followed him out the door over the next year, replaced by Marcus's fraternity brothers and business school buddies who knew nothing about agriculture. I was 28, working as operations manager, supposedly Marcus's right hand, but every suggestion I made got dismissed in meetings. I proposed expanding into organic produce distribution, presented a 60-page analysis showing 40% market growth projections. Marcus barely glanced at it. Organic is a fad, Claire. Stick to what you know. 2 months later, he pitched the exact same plan to the board, his name on the cover, added a flashy PowerPoint, and got approved for $2 million in expansion funding. When I confronted him in the parking lot after that meeting, he leaned against his Tesla and smirked. You're too emotional for executive decisions. This is why Dad wanted me in charge. The fraud started small, or maybe it had been going on longer and I just finally noticed. I was reviewing quarterly financials in March, 3 years ago, cross-referencing vendor payments against delivery receipts. A company called Pacific Northwest Supplies had invoiced us $47,000 for agricultural equipment maintenance. I'd never heard of them. I checked our equipment logs, nothing matched. Dug deeper and found 8 more invoices over 6 months, totaling $340,000, all to vendors I couldn't verify. I brought it to our CFO, Gerald Moss, a yes-man Marcus hired to replace the old controller who'd retired. Gerald told me the invoices were legitimate, approved by Marcus personally, and I should focus on my own departmental budgets. The way he said it, hands folded, eyes avoiding mine, told me he knew exactly what was happening. I spent 3 weeks digging on my own time, running background checks through business registries, tracking bank accounts through public filings. Pacific Northwest Supplies was a shell company registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. The payment trail led to an account in the Cayman Islands, and the signatory on file was Richard Donovan, my father. 2 other shell vendors connected to accounts where Marcus was listed. They created an entire fake supply chain, billing the company for services never rendered, splitting the money between offshore accounts. Total damage over 18 months, $800,000 stolen from investor capital we'd raised to expand into California markets. I sat in my apartment staring at spreadsheets until 3 a.m., stomach churning. This wasn't just fraud, it was betrayal of everything Grandpa built, theft from people who trusted our family name. I tried doing it the right way. I scheduled a private meeting with Dad at his house, brought printed evidence, laid it out on his mahogany desk in the study where Grandpa's portrait hung on the wall. This is fraud, I said, voice shaking but clear. We need to stop this and return the money before investors find out. Dad didn't even look at the papers. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. Claire, you're misunderstanding some complex financial structures. Marcus is positioning us for long-term growth. These are legitimate business expenses. I pointed to the shell company registrations, the offshore accounts, his own name on bank documents. He stood up, walked to the window overlooking their pool. You're out of your depth here. Let the adults handle corporate finance. The dismissal in his voice, the condescension, lit something cold in my chest. I'm bringing this to the board, I said. He turned, face hard. Do that, and you'll regret it. The board meeting happened on a Tuesday in early November. I requested an emergency session, citing financial irregularities requiring immediate investigation. The board consisted of 6 members, Dad, Marcus, 2 family friends who'd invested early, and 2 outside directors brought in during our last capital raise. I presented everything, handed out copies of the evidence, walked them through the paper trail. Marcus stayed calm, played confused, suggested I'd misread standard business practices. Dad backed him up, called my accusations reckless and damaging to family unity. The 2 family friends, both men who'd gone on fishing trips with Dad for 20 years, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. One outside director, Susan Reeves, a former banking executive, studied the documents with narrowed eyes. These need independent audit, she said. The other outside director, Thomas Park, agreed. Marcus requested a week to provide explanation. The meeting adjourned with tension thick enough to cut. 3 days later, on Friday afternoon, I got called to Dad's office. Marcus was there, along with Gerald, the CFO, and our corporate attorney, a shark named Mitchell Wade who'd helped structure the shell companies, though I didn't know that yet. Claire, we're terminating your employment effective immediately, Mitchell said, sliding a severance agreement across the desk. For cause, due to insubordination and spreading false allegations that damage company reputation. I looked at Dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Marcus examined his cufflinks. You can't fire me for reporting fraud, I said. Mitchell smiled thinly. We're firing you for insubordination, hostile behavior towards senior management, and failure to follow proper channels. The severance is generous, $50,000, contingent on signing an NDA prohibiting any discussion of internal company matters. My hands clenched. I won't sign. Dad finally looked up. Then you leave with nothing, and we make sure you never work in this industry again. I stood, legs unsteady. I have copies of everything. The truth comes out eventually. Marcus laughed, actually laughed. Good luck with that. Who's going to believe the disgruntled employee over the family that built this company? I walked out with my desk contents in a cardboard box. Past employees who'd worked with me for 6 years, all of them avoiding eye contact. Ramon called me that night, having heard through the warehouse network. They're scared, Mija, he said, his voice heavy. You hit bone. I filed complaints with the SEC and Oregon's Department of Justice, sent them every document I had. The wheels of regulatory investigation turned slow. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away. Mom called and insisted I attend, said family was family, and we needed to present unity. I should have known it was a trap. The Thanksgiving table sat 40 people that year, extended family, business partners, Dad's golf buddies, Marcus's socialite wife Veronica, Sienna's latest boyfriend, who owned a Tesla dealership. The dining room dripped with money, crystal chandeliers over imported linens, china that cost more than most people's cars. I arrived late, took a seat near the end, across from Sienna, who barely acknowledged me. Mom seated Marcus at the head opposite Dad, a symbolic passing of a torch. Dinner started with the usual small talk, football scores, vacation plans, someone's new boat. I pushed food around my plate, appetite gone. Then Marcus stood, tapped his Waterford crystal glass with a silver fork until the room quieted. I want to thank everyone for being here, he began, smooth and practiced. Family is everything to the Donovans. It's the foundation Grandpa Patrick built this company on. Heads nodded. I felt ice in my stomach, which is why it pains me to address something difficult. His eyes found mine. Claire has made serious accusations against Dad and me, trying to undermine the business with false claims of financial misconduct. She's betrayed the family trust, and as of today, she's no longer employed by Donovan Agricultural. Gasps rippled around the table. After a lot of soul-searching, I've realized Claire doesn't understand what it means to be a Donovan, what loyalty means. So I'm announcing publicly, Claire, you're no longer family. You chose your path. He raised his glass. To family that stands together. People lifted their glasses in stunned silence. Dad nodded approvingly and started carving the turkey again. Mom smiled that tight smile she used at charity functions, passed the cranberry sauce to her sister. Sienna's phone was up, recording my face, waiting for tears or an outburst she could monetize. 40 pairs of eyes locked on me. My chest felt crushed, breathing labored, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. I set down my fork with a soft click, wiped my mouth, stood without a word, and walked through the dining room, through the marble foyer, out the front door into cold November rain. Behind me, I heard Veronica stage whisper, how dramatic. Someone laughed. The door closed, cutting off the sound. I got in my 12-year-old Honda, hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to start the engine, and drove back to my apartment in southeast Portland, a 1-bedroom above a coffee shop that smelled like espresso and old wood. I sat on the couch until midnight, numb, then opened my laptop and started planning. The SEC investigation continued, but slowly, bureaucratically. I had enough savings to last 3 months if I was careful. The industry blacklist Dad threatened was real. I sent 40 resumes to agricultural companies across the Northwest and got 0 responses. By January, money was running low. I sold my car, paid off the loan, and pocketed $4,000. Moved to a cheaper studio in outer Northeast, $650 a month with bars on the windows. Waited tables at a breakfast diner on Burnside, early shifts, going home smelling like bacon grease and maple syrup. Ramon checked in weekly, offered to help however he could, but he was barely scraping by himself after they fired him. I felt erased, like the 28 years I'd given to that family meant nothing. March brought a shift. I was scrolling job boards late one night and saw an ad for a coding boot camp at Portland State, 12-week intensive program in software development, focused on practical applications. $8,000 tuition, financing available. I had $15,000 left in savings total, my emergency fund that was supposed to last until I found another job. Agricultural jobs weren't coming. I needed a complete pivot. I signed up, paid the deposit, and started classes in April. The coursework was brutal. 60 hours a week of JavaScript, Python, database management, full-stack development. I was 31, surrounded by 22-year-olds who'd grown up coding. I stayed late every night in the lab, building practice apps, failing, rebuilding. One instructor, Jenna Park, a former Amazon engineer, noticed my work ethic. "You've got something most of these kids don't," she said during office hours. "You understand business problems, not just code. That's valuable." I told her my background, the agricultural logistics experience, the betrayal, everything. She listened, then said, "Build something that solves a problem you actually know. Farmers need better tech." The idea crystallized during a weekend visit to a farm in the Willamette Valley, a small organic operation run by the Martinez family who'd supplied Donovan Agricultural for years before Marcus dropped them for cheaper industrial sources. I asked Carlos Martinez, the owner, what his biggest headache was. "Yield prediction," he said immediately. "We never know exactly when to harvest for peak quality or how much to expect. Waste kills us." I spent that entire weekend interviewing him, his wife, 2 other farmers they introduced me to. Wrote down everything: irrigation schedules, weather pattern problems, pest management issues, market timing challenges. Back in Portland, I started coding. The prototype was rough, a simple app that aggregated weather data, soil sensor readings, and historical yield numbers to predict optimal harvest windows. I showed it to Carlos in June. He tested it on 2 acres of strawberries, compared it to his usual methods. The app predicted harvest window produced 18% better quality berries and reduced waste by $3,000 on that small plot alone. "This works," he said, eyes bright. "How much?" I charged him $500 for the first season, just to validate the model. He told 3 other farmers. By September, I had 8 clients paying between $500 and $1,200 each, depending on acreage. Total income, $6,400 in 3 months. I was still waiting tables, but I quit the dinner shifts and focused mornings on coding, building out features. The app needed a real name. I called it Harvest Tech, simple and direct. One of my farming clients mentioned Dr. Alan Shin, an agronomist at University of Washington who researched precision agriculture and might want to see what I'd built. I drove to Seattle in my new used car, a $2,800 Toyota with 180,000 miles, and met Dr. Chin in his office on campus. Showed him the app on my laptop, walked through the algorithms. He pulled out his phone and started testing it against his own research models. "This is sophisticated work," he said, looking up. "Who's funding you?" I laughed, explained I was bootstrapped, living on savings and waitress tips. He asked about my background, the fraud case, the family exile. Then he said something that changed everything. "I've been looking for a technical partner to commercialize some of my research. I have $75,000 in grant money that's earmarked for technology development. How would you feel about forming a real company?" By October, we incorporated Harvest Tech Solutions as an LLC in Washington State, Dr. Chin holding 30% equity for his investment and expertise, me holding 70% for building the technology and running operations. We rented a small office in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood, $1,200 a month, 2 desks and a folding table. Hired 1 part-time developer, a boot camp graduate named Omar who worked for equity, and $25 an hour. Dr. Chin opened doors to agricultural cooperatives across Washington and Oregon, organizations representing hundreds of small to mid-sized farms. I pitched our software as a subscription service, $200 per month for basic yield prediction, $500 for premium features, including pest management AI and market price optimization. The pitch worked because I spoke their language, understood their pain points from years inside the industry. By December, we had 30 clients, $9,000 in monthly recurring revenue, barely covering costs but proving the model worked. The real breakthrough came in February, 1 year after I'd walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner. The Willamette Valley Growers Cooperative, representing 150 farms across Oregon, issued an RFP for farm management software to replace their outdated systems. The contract was worth $300,000 annually with options to renew. I spent 3 weeks on the proposal, working 18-hour days, building custom demos that showed exactly how our AI could optimize their specific crops: hazelnuts, berries, wine grapes, vegetables. Presented to their board on a rainy Tuesday in Salem, 7 farmers in Carhartt jackets, and one MBA type who ran their finances. Walked them through live dashboards pulling real data from beta test farms, showed 22% average yield improvements and 15% cost reductions. The MBA asked about scalability. I pulled up our technical architecture, explained how we built on cloud infrastructure that could handle 10,000 farms without breaking. The farmers asked if I understood their world. I told them about growing up in agriculture, about my grandfather, about working warehouses, and learning from people like Ramon. Didn't mention the family drama. The room softened. They voted to approve the contract that day, pending legal review. We signed in March. $300,000 annual recurring revenue changed everything. We moved to a bigger office in South Lake Union, hired 5 full-time developers, brought on a sales lead who'd worked in agricultural tech for a decade. Dr. Chin focused on research partnerships while I ran operations, product development, and client relationships. By summer, word spread through farming networks. We landed contracts with cooperatives in California's Central Valley, Idaho potato growers, and Washington apple orchards. Revenue hit $1.8 million for the year. Venture scouts started reaching out, but I wasn't interested in giving up control yet. We stayed lean, reinvested profits, grew deliberately. I paid myself $85,000 that year, enough to rent a decent apartment in Capitol Hill and stop eating ramen every night, but nothing extravagant. The money mattered less than the validation that I'd built something real, something useful, without the Donovan name attached. Year 2 brought exponential growth. Harvest Tech's AI models got smarter with more data, accuracy improved to 94% on yield predictions, and we added features for crop disease detection using satellite imagery. Total revenue, $4.2 million across 400 client farms and 12 agricultural cooperatives. We expanded the team to 25 people, opened a small office in San Francisco to serve California clients better. I hired Sarah Kim, a former Microsoft product manager, as COO to handle day-to-day operations while I focused on strategy and major partnerships. The industry noticed. We won AgTech Innovator of the Year from the American Farm Bureau Federation. Forbes ran a profile, how one woman disrupted agricultural tech after family betrayal. I didn't mention names in the interview, kept it vague, but anyone in Oregon agriculture knew exactly who I was talking about. The publicity brought bigger opportunities. John Deere's innovation team reached out, interested in licensing our AI for integration with their equipment. We negotiated for 4 months, back and forth on terms, equity stakes, control issues. Finally closed a partnership deal, $12 million over 3 years, combining their hardware sensors with our predictive algorithms, royalties on every unit sold with our tech embedded. The announcement hit trade publications in August. My phone exploded with congratulations from old colleagues, farming clients, even a few former Donovan agricultural employees who'd quietly stayed in touch. I'd been living in Seattle for 3 years, completely disconnected from my family. No calls, no emails, no social media interaction. I'd blocked their numbers, unfollowed every account, built a new life in a new city where nobody knew my history. News about Donovan Agricultural occasionally reached me through industry gossip. They'd lost major clients after I left. Operations had become sloppy. Marcus's business school buddies didn't actually know how to run agricultural logistics. Financially, they were bleeding. The SEC investigation I triggered was moving forward, slowly but inevitably. I didn't follow it closely, didn't need to. My focus was building Harvest Tech into something Grandpa would have been proud of, something based on actually helping farmers instead of extracting wealth from them. Then, 6 months ago, on a Thursday morning in April, an email appeared in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line: Urgent family matter, legal representation. I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me open it. The sender was Mitchell Wade, the attorney who'd helped fire me 3 years ago. The message was brief and formal. Ms. Donovan, I represent your family in a matter requiring immediate attention and financial assistance. Donovan Agricultural Distribution is facing federal charges related to financial irregularities. Your father and brother need $2 million for legal defense and settlement negotiations. As a family member and beneficiary of the family trust, we request your support. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss arrangements. I read it twice, then started laughing, a bitter sound in my quiet apartment. They'd stolen money, committed fraud, exiled me publicly, and now wanted me to fund their escape from consequences. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called my own attorney, Rebecca Torres, a sharp litigator I'd hired the previous year to handle Harvest Tech's contracts and intellectual property. Forwarded her the email. She read it and said, "They've got nerve, I'll give them that." We strategized. I wanted full information before engaging, needed to know exactly what they were facing, and whether this was legitimate desperation or another manipulation. Rebecca contacted Mitchell Wade, said I was considering the request but needed complete documentation, federal charging documents, financial statements, details on the criminal case. Mitchell sent everything within 48 hours, which told me how desperate they really were. The documents painted a clear picture. The SEC investigation had finally concluded, referring the case to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. Marcus and Richard faced charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering related to the $800,000 in fake vendor schemes I'd exposed, plus an additional $2.2 million in similar schemes they continued after I left. Total theft, over $3 million from investor funds. The evidence was overwhelming: their own bank records, emails coordinating the shell companies, signed documents creating the offshore accounts. They were looking at potential prison sentences of 5 to 7 years, each if convicted. The $2 million they wanted would go toward hiring a white-collar crime defense team to negotiate a plea deal that might reduce charges to probation and restitution instead of jail time. Without it, they'd be assigned public defenders and likely get the maximum sentence. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Vega, no relation to my brother, to do a deep financial background check on the whole family. What he uncovered made my blood boil. Over the 3 years since I'd left, while they were stealing investor money and running the company into the ground, they'd spent lavishly. Marcus bought an $850,000 house in Lake Oswego, 2 Mercedes in the driveway, country club membership at $40,000 annually. Took Veronica on a 3-week European vacation that cost $60,000 based on social media posts and credit card receipts Marcus Vega obtained through legal channels. Dad and Mom renovated their West Hills mansion, $400,000 in upgrades, including a new pool and guest house. Sienna, who'd never worked a real day in her life, launched a lifestyle brand called Donovan Luxe, selling overpriced candles and bath products that failed within 6 months after burning through $150,000 in family loans she never repaid. Total frivolous spending while committing fraud, over $2.8 million. They burned investor money on luxury items, and now wanted me to bail them out. The investigator also found that Mom had tried to access the family trust funds, the inheritance from Grandpa Patrick, but the trust structure he'd set up required unanimous consent from all 3 grandchildren for any withdrawals over $50,000. I still held veto power. She'd sent requests to the trust administrator 3 times in the past year, trying to get $500,000 released, claiming business emergency needs. Each time, the administrator contacted me for approval. I denied all 3 without explanation. Now I understood why she kept trying. 2 weeks after the initial email, my phone rang from a number I'd blocked years ago, Mom's cell. I'd upgraded my block settings, but she'd gotten through somehow, probably using a new number. I answered, curious what she'd say. "Claire, sweetheart, it's Mom." Her voice was strained, trying for warmth but failing. "We need to talk about this legal situation. Can you please just listen?" I waited, said nothing. She continued, "Your father and Marcus made mistakes, I'll admit that. But prison, that's not justice, that's cruelty. We're family. We need to come together." I let her talk for 5 minutes, the same manipulation tactics she'd always used. Appeals to family loyalty, reminders of good times that never existed, suggestions that I was being selfish and vindictive. Finally, I interrupted. "I'll consider a meeting. In person, all of you at my office in Seattle. Next week." She agreed immediately, too quickly, which told me they discussed the scenario and had a plan. The meeting was set for the following Thursday at 2 p.m. at Harvest Tech's offices. I prepared meticulously with Rebecca's help. Set up the main conference room with a massive 80-inch monitor at one end, cameras recording from 3 angles for legal documentation, and had my entire leadership team briefed and on standby in case things got heated. Sarah Kim, my COO, would sit in as a witness. Rebecca would be present as counsel. I wanted overwhelming force, a show of strength that made clear I wasn't the powerless 31-year-old they'd fired anymore. They arrived in a hired black SUV, couldn't afford their own drivers anymore apparently. Marcus, Richard, and Patricia walked into our modern office space, sleek glass and polished concrete, so different from Donovan Agricultural's old school with paneling and brass fixtures. They looked diminished somehow, older and more tired than I remembered. Dad's hair had gone completely gray. Marcus had gained weight, face puffy from stress or drinking. Mom wore a designer suit that couldn't hide the tension in her shoulders. I met them in the lobby, didn't offer hugs or pleasantries, just gestured toward the conference room. "Follow me." We sat across from each other at the long table, them on one side, me flanked by Sarah and Rebecca on the other. The power dynamic was immediately clear. This was my territory, my company, my rules. Marcus tried to take control anyway, leaning forward with forced confidence. Claire, we appreciate you agreeing to meet. I know things ended badly between us, but we're hoping you can see past that. We're in serious trouble here, and we need family to step up. $2 million is nothing to you now. You just signed a $12 million deal with John Deere. This would save Dad from prison, save the family name. I let him finish, then opened my laptop without responding. Clicked a few keys. The 80-inch monitor behind me lit up. Before we discuss anything, I said, voice calm and cold, I want to make sure we're all operating from the same set of facts. The screen showed a video file and I hit play. It was Thanksgiving dinner from 3 years ago, filmed from multiple angles I'd obtained from Sienna's own Instagram posts and other guest social media before they deleted everything. The audio was crystal clear, amplified and cleaned up by a professional service. Marcus's voice rang through the conference room speakers. Claire, you're no longer family. You never understood what it means to be a Donovan. The camera caught Dad smiling, Mom passing cranberry sauce, the entire room raising glasses. I let it play for 30 seconds, then paused. That's you publicly disowning me for reporting the fraud you committed. Want to deny it? Marcus's face went red. That was a misunderstanding. We were emotional. I clicked to the next file. Here's an email from you to Gerald Moss, your CFO, dated 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. The screen showed the message. Gerald, Claire's becoming a problem with her questions about the Pacific NW supplies invoices. We need to terminate her before she causes more damage. Coordinate with Mitchell on the legal angle, make it airtight. And let's make the Thanksgiving dinner a clear message to anyone else thinking about crossing us. Mom inhaled sharply. Dad stared at the table. Want to call that a misunderstanding too? I asked. I clicked through 10 more slides, each one a piece of evidence. Bank statements showing the offshore accounts. Shell company registration documents with their forged signatures. Wire transfer records totaling $3.1 million stolen from investors. Communications between Marcus and Dad coordinating the schemes. The SEC's final investigation report confirming every accusation I'd made. Then came the personal spending. Photos of Marcus's Lake Oswego mansion, screenshots of Veronica's Instagram from their European trip with geotags and dates, receipts for the Mercedes purchases, invoices for Mom and Dad's home renovation. While you were stealing investor money, you spent it on this. $2.8 million in luxury purchases while telling your employees you couldn't afford raises. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Rebecca spoke next, her voice professional and cutting. Just so we're clear on the legal situation, you're facing federal wire fraud and money laundering charges with an evidentiary record that's essentially airtight. The prosecution has offered a plea deal, 4 years in federal prison for Marcus, 4 years for Richard, both with supervised release and full restitution of stolen funds. Without competent legal defense, you'll likely get the maximum sentence, 7 years each. The $2 million you're requesting would hire a top defense team that might negotiate those 4-year sentences down to probation plus restitution, keeping you out of prison entirely. Dad looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Exactly, he said. That's why we need Claire's help. She has the money. She can stop this. I leaned back in my chair, studying them. You're right, I have the money. The question is, why would I give it to you? Mom tried next, voice breaking. Because we're your family, Claire. Because your grandfather would want us to stay together, not tear each other apart. I almost laughed. Grandpa Patrick would want you in prison for what you did to his company. He built Donovan Agricultural on integrity, and you turned it into a criminal enterprise. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. We made mistakes, fine. But you're really going to let your own father go to prison out of spite? That's who you've become. I prepared for this moment, rehearsed it mentally 100 times. I opened one more file on the screen. It was a corporate acquisition document, dated 2 weeks ago. While you were busy preparing for federal prison, I was busy acquiring something interesting. The document showed that Harvest Tech Solutions had purchased all assets of Donovan Agricultural Distribution at a bankruptcy auction. The company had filed Chapter 7 liquidation after losing their remaining clients and being unable to pay debts following the fraud investigation. All physical assets, the warehouses, equipment, vehicles, intellectual property, and the Donovan Agricultural name itself had been sold to satisfy creditors. Purchase price, $380,000. Paid by a shell company I'd created specifically for this purpose, then transferred to Harvest Tech. I now own everything Grandpa built. The warehouse in Portland where he started, the distribution networks, the brand name, all of it. Dad's face went white. Marcus looked like he'd been punched. You can't, Marcus said. That's our family legacy. I smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. It was your family legacy. You destroyed it through fraud and incompetence. I bought it legally at auction. And here's what I'm doing with it. I clicked to the next slide, a press release draft. I'm donating all physical assets to the Oregon Agricultural Cooperative Network, a nonprofit that represents small family farms. They'll operate the warehouses as a cooperative distribution hub, owned by the farmers themselves, everything Grandpa actually believed in before you turned it into a profit extraction scheme. The Donovan name will be changed to the Patrick Donovan Memorial Distribution Center. It'll serve farmers at cost, no profit motive, a genuine community resource. Patricia started crying, real tears or performance, I couldn't tell and didn't care. You're erasing our family, she said. No, I corrected. I'm erasing what you turned it into. Grandpa's values stay. Your corruption gets wiped clean. I closed the laptop and stood. Now, about the $2 million you need. Here's my answer, no. You publicly disowned me, stole money intended to help farmers, spent it on luxuries, and now expect me to fund your escape from consequences. I reported your crimes 3 years ago because it was the right thing to do. I'm not stopping the legal process now. You earned those prison sentences. Serve them. Marcus jumped up, face purple with rage. You vindictive bitch. This is about revenge, not justice. Rebecca pressed a button under the table, and 2 security guards entered immediately, both former law enforcement, big guys in suits with earpieces. Gentlemen, Rebecca said calmly, please escort these individuals out of the building. They're not to return to this property. The guards moved toward Marcus, who looked ready to swing. Dad grabbed his arm. Don't make it worse, son. They left, Mom sobbing, Dad's shoulders hunched, Marcus shooting murderous looks over his shoulder. I watched them go from the conference room window, saw the SUV drive away into Seattle traffic. Sarah looked at me after they left. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Better than okay. That's been 3 years coming. We had the video footage backed up to secure servers, documentation of the entire meeting in case they tried anything later. Rebecca filed a supplemental report with the federal prosecutors that same day, detailing the meeting and confirming I wouldn't be providing funds for their defense, which closed off that avenue. The legal process moved forward without interruption. 3 months later, the sentencing happened. I didn't attend, didn't need to watch them stand before a judge. Rebecca sent me the transcript. Marcus Donovan, 4 years in federal prison at FCI Sheridan in Oregon, followed by 3 years supervised release and restitution of $1.85 million to defrauded investors. Richard Donovan, 4 years at the same facility, 3 years supervised release, joint restitution responsibility. They both accepted plea deals in the end, their public defender doing decent work despite limited resources. Patricia wasn't charged criminally, but she faced civil lawsuits from investors that would drain whatever money she had left. The West Hills mansion went into foreclosure 3 weeks after sentencing, sold at auction for $1.2 million, barely covering the mortgage and liens. She moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in Gresham, a working-class neighborhood she used to sneer at during charity functions. Last I heard through industry gossip, she was working as a receptionist at a medical clinic for $16 an hour. Sienna's life imploded too, collateral damage from the family scandal. Her lifestyle brand collapsed completely when news broke about the criminal charges. Sponsorship deals vanished. Her Instagram follower count dropped from 85,000 to 12,000 as people abandoned her for association with fraud. She tried rebranding as a redemption story influencer, posting tearful videos about learning from family mistakes, but audiences saw through it. The comments were brutal. She ended up taking a customer service job at a call center in Beaverton, $15 an hour plus commission, living with roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment. Her boyfriend, the Tesla dealership owner, dumped her the week after the sentencing, unwilling to be connected to the scandal. Meanwhile, Harvest Tech continued growing. The John Deere partnership launched publicly 6 months after the family meeting, integrating our AI into their latest precision agriculture equipment. Every tractor sold with our technology embedded generated royalty payments. We expanded internationally, opening an office in Amsterdam to serve European markets, then Sao Paulo for South American agriculture. Annual revenue projected at $25 million for the current year. Staff grew to 85 employees across 3 countries. I promoted Sarah Kim to president, handling most operational decisions while I focused on strategic partnerships and product innovation. The company culture was everything Donovan Agricultural wasn't. Transparent financials shared with all employees, profit-sharing bonuses based on company performance, comprehensive health benefits, flexible remote work, and a strict ethics code that every employee signed. I created the Patrick Donovan Fellowship with $500,000 of my own money, a fund administered through Oregon State University's agriculture program. It provides full-ride scholarships to students from rural farming communities who want to study agricultural science, engineering, or business, with a focus on sustainable practices. 20 students got funding in the first year, kids from small towns across Oregon, Washington, and Idaho who couldn't otherwise afford college. At the annual reception where we met the first cohort, I gave a short speech about Grandpa Patrick, about integrity in business, about how real legacy gets built through service, not extraction. Some of those students had worked on farms that now used Harvest Tech software. The circle felt complete. Personal life rebuilt slowly but genuinely. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, mostly focused on work and friendships. Reconnected with old colleagues from my Donovan agricultural days who'd quietly supported me, people like Ramon who'd been fired for questioning Marcus. I hired Ramon as a consultant for Harvest Tech, paying him $80,000 a year to review our logistics and warehouse operations, bringing his 35 years of experience to improve our supply chain. He cried when I made the offer, said he thought that part of his life was over. "You're the real Donovan," he told me. Patrick would be proud. That meant more than any revenue milestone. The Oregon Agricultural Cooperative Network formally opened the Patrick Donovan Memorial Distribution Center in a ceremony I attended last fall. The old warehouse, where I'd learned to drive forklifts at 15, had been renovated, modernized with solar panels and energy-efficient systems, repainted with a mural of wheat fields on one wall. A bronze plaque at the entrance read, "Patrick Donovan, 1942 to 2014. Builder of community, servant of farmers, man of integrity." 300 people attended the opening, farmers in clean flannel, cooperative directors, agricultural extension agents, even the governor sent a representative. They asked me to speak, and I kept it short. My grandfather believed agriculture was about feeding people and supporting communities, not extracting maximum profit. This center honors that belief. It's run by farmers, for farmers, as a genuine cooperative resource. That's his real legacy. Applause filled the warehouse, echoing off the high ceilings. Several farmers approached me afterward, people who'd known Grandpa Patrick personally, saying he'd have loved seeing his vision restored. I never heard from my immediate family again after that conference room meeting. No letters from prison, no attempts to contact through intermediaries, no surprise appearances. Rebecca had sent formal cease and desist letters, making clear that any contact would result in harassment charges and restraining orders. They got the message. Occasionally, I'd see updates through public records. Marcus transferred to a minimum security facility after 18 months for good behavior. Dad underwent medical treatment for high blood pressure while incarcerated. Mom filed for bankruptcy to discharge the civil lawsuit debts. None of it moved me. They'd made their choices, lived with consequences, same as anyone else. I'd moved forward completely, built something meaningful, surrounded myself with people who chose to be there instead of being bound by biology. Thanksgiving 3 years after that disastrous dinner was spent at Harvest Tech's Seattle office with the entire team. We shut down operations for the day, brought in catering from a farm-to-table restaurant that sourced from our client farms, organic turkey and locally grown vegetables, pies made with hazelnuts from Oregon orchards we helped optimize. 85 employees and their families filled the office space, kids running between desks, laughter bouncing off the glass walls. I stood and offered a toast, not the bitter announcement Marcus had made, but something real. I'm thankful for every person here who believed in building technology that genuinely helps people. You chose to work towards something meaningful, and that matters more than anything. This is family, the one we create through shared values and mutual respect. People raised glasses, kombucha and wine and apple cider, to genuine belonging. Later that evening, after most folks had left, and I was helping clean up with Sarah and a few others, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn message. It was Susan Reeves, the outside board director from Donovan Agricultural who'd pushed for an independent audit 3 years ago. "Claire, I wanted to reach out and say I'm sorry. Sorry for not fighting harder when they fired you. Sorry for not standing up louder against what was obviously fraud. I resigned from that board 2 weeks after you left, couldn't be associated with what they were doing. I followed your success with Harvest Tech from a distance, and I'm incredibly impressed. You built something real from the ashes. Your grandfather would be immensely proud. If you ever need a board advisor, or just someone to talk business strategy, my door is open." I read it twice, appreciated the acknowledgement, but didn't need her redemption. I sent a brief professional reply. "Thank you for the message, Susan. The past is done. I'm focused on building forward." That's where I'd stayed. Building forward, eyes ahead. The lesson I learned through all of it crystallized into something simple. Family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by who shows up, who supports you, who challenges you to grow, and who celebrates your success without trying to diminish it. The people who called themselves my family gave me nothing but trauma and theft. The people I chose, my team, my mentors, my real friends, those people built me up and built with me. Loyalty isn't owed to blood, it's earned through actions. When biological family proves toxic, cutting them off isn't cruelty, it's survival and self-respect. I don't regret walking away from that Thanksgiving table. I don't regret refusing to fund their legal defense. I don't regret buying Grandpa's company and giving it to people who'd actually honor what he built. Every choice I made after they disowned me led to something better, stronger, more authentic. Success became the answer to every insult they'd thrown at me. They called me disloyal. I built a company on integrity that serves 400 farms and employs 85 people. They said I'd never work in agriculture again. I revolutionized agricultural technology and partnered with the biggest equipment manufacturer in the world. They erased me from family. I created a chosen family of colleagues and friends who genuinely care. They burned Grandpa's legacy through greed. I restored it through service. The contrast between their lives now, broken by consequences they earned, and mine, thriving through work I'm proud of, tells the whole story. Justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it's just living well, building something meaningful, and refusing to let toxic people drain your energy. To everyone who stayed with me through this entire story, thank you for listening. I know it's long, but some stories need the full context to understand why boundaries matter so much. Have you ever had to cut out toxic family members to protect your own growth and peace? What was that decision like for you? I'd genuinely love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if you face similar betrayals or hard choices about family, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I share these stories because I believe we all need to hear that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt us, even when they're blood relatives. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Building your own path when others try to control you isn't rebellion, it's survival. See you in the next story.